Welcome to Quantum Tech Sage. In today's video, we are going to go over the two new frontier models that are competing for the same role. GPT 5.6. Sol comes from OpenAI, while Claude Fable 5 is Anthropic's most capable broadly released model. This comparison is for three kinds of viewers: everyday users deciding what to open first, developers choosing an API, and companies deciding where to place important workflows. The short version is that there is no universal winner. Sol makes a very strong case as the default workhorse. Fable makes a strong case when judgment, planning, and long-running work justify a premium. Let's unpack that without turning vendor benchmarks into marketing theater. Here is the decision in one slide. For most people and most production workflows, start with Sol. Its API prices are lower. It supports a broad set of tools. And OpenAI reports strong results across professional work, coding, and science. Fable is the premium specialist. Anthropic positions it for the most demanding reasoning and long-running agentic work, with adaptive thinking always enabled. That does not mean Fable always wins, or that Sol is merely the cheaper option. It means the rational default is Sol. While Fable deserves an escalation path for tasks where better judgment could be worth more than the extra token bill. Treat this as a starting hypothesis, then validate it on your own examples. The headline specifications are surprisingly close. Sol has a 1.05 million token context window. Fable has a 1 million token window. Both can produce up to 128,000 output tokens in one request. In plain language, both can work across very large codebases, document collections, or long conversations. The economic difference is clearer. Sol lists at $5 per million input tokens and $30 per million output tokens. Fable lists at 10 and 50. So Fable's input is twice the price, and its output is about 67% more expensive. One important caveat: Sol applies higher pricing to very long prompts beyond its stated threshold, while Anthropic says Fable's full 1 million token window uses standard pricing. For an everyday user, convenience dominates. If you need an explanation, a plan, a summary, shopping research, or help with a spreadsheet, start with Sol. Both models can accept very large contexts, so neither has a simple advantage for a big document pack. Fable becomes interesting when the request is open-ended and you care about taste, framing, or strategic judgment, things that are difficult to reduce to one benchmark score. For multi-step work that uses tools, Sol is a strong first attempt because OpenAI exposes web search, file search, code execution, computer use, and other tools around the model. But remember that the surrounding product matters. Rate limits, file handling, voice, projects, and integrations can change the experience more than a small model quality gap. For developers, the choice is less about raw context and more about economics and control. Sol's API identifier is GPT-5.6-Sol. The GPT-5.6 alias routes to it. Fable's identifier is Claude-Fable-5. Both support text and image input, text output, tool use, and very long context. Sol exposes explicit reasoning levels from none through max, while OpenAI's Ultra mode coordinates multiple agents in supported products. Fable uses adaptive thinking that is always on. Sol is positioned for complex professional work. Fable for the most demanding long-running agents. One gap in this two-model framing: Anthropic also shipped Claude Opus 5 on July 24, 2026, positioned as coming close to Fable's intelligence at roughly half the price, a real middle option this deck doesn't benchmark. If you're optimizing for cost per unit of quality rather than the absolute ceiling, test it alongside Sol and Fable. The practical evaluation is therefore straightforward. Replay your representative tasks, measure end-to-end success, latency, token usage, refusals, and engineering overhead, not just the cost of a single API call. Benchmarks are useful when they are treated as evidence, not as a verdict. On OpenAI's launch page, Sol scores 52.7% on Agent's last exam, compared with 40.5% for Fable. That evaluation is designed around long-running professional workflows. Fable leads elsewhere on that same page. On GDP Val AA version 2, a broad measure of professional deliverable quality, Fable scores 1,759.6 ELO versus Sol's 1,747.8. And on SWE Bench Pro, the coding benchmark most developers actually recognize, Fable leads by a wide margin, 80% versus Sol's 64.6%. That matters because elsewhere in this deck, we call Sol the stronger execution engine for tool-heavy and coding work. On this specific, widely used benchmark, that's backwards. The honest read is that the two models trade wins by domain rather than one being uniformly stronger. And remember, OpenAI publishes comparisons that favor Sol. Anthropic publishes comparisons that favor Fable. So treat all of these numbers as a hypothesis. Then run a blind evaluation on your own prompts, your own files, and your own acceptance criteria. The useful mental model is execution engine versus judgment engine. Sol looks like the better execution engine. Lower cost, explicit effort settings, strong tool support, and a multi-agent mode for complex work. Fable looks like the judgment engine. Anthropic describes it as its most capable broadly released model for demanding reasoning and long-running agents, with adaptive thinking always active. This is an editorial inference, not a scientifically proven personality difference. And the coding benchmark on the previous slide is a reminder not to take it too literally. It can still help you design a test. Give Sol the repeatable, tool-heavy workflow. Give Fable the ambiguous brief where framing and critique matter. Then swap them. If the result does not change, choose the cheaper and easier option. If it does, you have found where the premium creates value. For companies, model quality is only one layer of the decision. Governance can eliminate an option before the benchmark discussion begins. Evaluate identity, admin controls, auditability, retention, data residency, and your cloud strategy. And treat this as more than theoretical. Anthropic suspended Fable 5 entirely for 3 weeks in June 2026 at the U.S. government's request over cybersecurity misuse concerns before redeploying it with new safety classifiers. Next, evaluate reliability as a system. Completion rate, refusals, latency, retrieves, and recovery after a failed tool call. Anthropic itself reports that roughly 5% of Fable sessions are quietly rerouted to a different, less capable model. Opus 4.8, because those classifiers block cyber, biology, and chemistry adjacent queries. That's a real disclosed reliability cost worth weighing alongside benchmark scores. Integration matters too. Sol is available across ChatGPT, Codex, and the OpenAI API. Fable is available across Claude.ai, Claude Code, the Claude API, and major cloud platforms. Finally, calculate total economics. Token price is visible, but retries, long prompts, tool calls, and human review can dominate the real bill. The procurement question is not who wins a leaderboard. It is which platform produces the most accepted work per total operating dollar. Here is a cost illustration and a correction to the sticker price. Imagine 1 million input tokens and 200,000 output tokens. A genuinely large job. At that size, the request crosses Sol's own long context threshold of 272,000 input tokens, so the entire request bills at Sol's higher rate. $10 input, $45 output, not the headline 5 and 30. That puts Sol at $19 for this job. Fable, which Anthropic prices the same way regardless of length, costs $20, 10 for input and 10 for output. So at this scale, Sol is only about $1 or 5% cheaper, not the 45% gap you'd get from its short context sticker price. Below 272,000 tokens, Sol's discount really is close to 45%. Above it, the advantage nearly disappears. The lesson isn't that Sol is expensive. It's that list price savings depend heavily on where your workload sits relative to a pricing cliff, and you have to check that before you bank a savings estimate, including in this deck's own numbers. So what should each audience do? Everyday users should start with Sol because it is the stronger default recommendation. Then switch to Fable for important writing, strategy, or a problem that remains stubborn after a good attempt. Developers should start with the Sol API because of price and control, but build the evaluation harness so Fable can be tested on complex planning and long-running agents. And worth a look, Claude Opus 5 as a mid-priced third option. Companies should avoid standardizing by instinct. Run a controlled bake-off using real work, blind review, and clear acceptance rules. Use Sol as the economic baseline. Ask Fable to justify its premium through more accepted outputs, fewer revisions, or less human review. The winner is not the model with the loudest launch. It is the model that improves your operation. You do not have to crown one permanent winner. A practical pattern is draft, challenge, scale. First, let Sol do the research, analysis, coding, or tool execution at the default price. Second, send the important result, or a safe summary of it, to Fable for critique. Ask it to find weak assumptions, missing stakeholders, and alternative strategies. Third, bring the approved approach back to Sol for repeatable production work. This pattern uses premium judgment selectively instead of paying for it everywhere. In a company, implement it only inside your approved data architecture. Vendor terms, retention rules, and sensitive information handling still apply. And if Fable's challenge step does not materially improve the result, remove it. A good AI architecture earns every additional model and every additional step. The bottom line is simple. Do not ask which model is smartest in the abstract. Ask which model improves your workflow. For most users and many developers, GPT 5.6. Sol is the sensible default. Claude Fable 5 is the escalation option when ambiguity, judgment, or long-running work makes the premium worthwhile. For companies, the decision rule should be accepted outcomes per total cost, including human review and failures, not tokens alone. If you found this comparison useful, test both models on the same 3 tasks you do every week. Score the outputs blindly, record the cost, and keep the evidence. That small experiment will tell you more than 100 online arguments about which model feels smarter. If you liked this video, then please like, subscribe, and share Quantum Tech Sage.